Welcome, everybody.
There we go.
Awesome.
Okay. And invariably, once we go live on Facebook, people start streaming in like, oh, yeah, that's right. It's on tonight. So we'll get some of those, but we've got a lot of people. I would say the bulk of everybody watches on Facebook Live now. So, all right. Well, welcome. How are you tonight, Kelly?
I'm great.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, just one thing before we get started, we've had some questions about the podcast and sort of the format. Every now and then we get people in the audience that are like, hey, when are we going to get to the topic tonight? So just to let everybody know from the beginning, sort of the format on this, we always take the first part to get to know you and kind of your story, sort of set up everything else before we get into the main topic, because we can jump right into a main topic with anybody, but that doesn't tell us anything about you necessarily, right? So we want to know who you are, where you live, what's going on in your life, all of those good things, and what brought you here today. And then we can kind of talk about the issues together. And of course, we've got Celeste with us tonight, and Christina, our resident life coach, which is awesome, and John, our family therapist, doctor in the house. So, and me, just an armchair quarterback, doesn't know what the heck he's talking about, but pretends like he does anyway. So we are super happy to have you on tonight. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I don't know you at all. So I always love those. I always say it every time. It's best because I get to organically know you a little bit better, ask those questions that feel authentic. Where do you live? What's going on with your life? I mean, I know just from what you had kind of sent us on the application for the show.
Sure. So I was born in Portland, Oregon. So you totally know that stomping ground. And
yeah.
Parents did a little stint in Butte, Montana, and then settled in Walla Walla, Washington. So I grew up in Walla Walla and graduated from there. So then I went off to beauty school in Provo, Utah. So did that, desperately poor. And so rather than going on mission, I chose to go to Connecticut, where I was a nanny. So that was a pretty awesome experience to see New York City and Connecticut, New Jersey, Washington, D.C. It was a lot of fun. It was a great time in my life, and I was glad that I did it. So I came home, and I had been home probably about a month and was dating a guy that I was trying to break it off with, and happened to go over to borrow his truck, and that's where I met my late husband. So he had just come home from his mission and happened to have served in the same mission as my brother. So we made that connection with another companion that was actually in my ward. My husband was not in my ward, he was in another ward. So we didn't see each other for about another month. And actually when I saw him again, he thought my name was Shelly. So that was a long joke in our marriage, was that my name was Shelly. So that was pretty awesome. We got engaged after dating about 4 months. Did not get married in Utah. Thank goodness I can say that.
Wow.
We were married in Seattle. Yeah. So he was from Idaho Falls. So he had actually always had wanted to get married in a Seattle temple. So that was pretty sweet that I got my way. And we went back to BYU. So he got his master's there, and then we went off to Michigan, and then California, or back to Oregon, and then eventually came back up here to Washington. So that's the small side of it, without all the big details in between. So
Okay, so you live in Washington now?
I live just north of Bellingham. Yeah.
Just north of Bellingham. That's almost Canada. I mean,
I can see the Canadian Rockies and the border crossing from my house.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. I was gonna say Bellingham is pretty much like practically the end of Washington. So if you're north of that, then like barely before you cross that border. So
yeah, literally, I can, like I said, I could walk up to the border if I wanted to.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I have a gorgeous view where I live. I see Mount Baker out one way, I see the Canadian Rockies the other way, and I can head over to the ocean. Well, not the ocean, but they're in the inlet right there. So it's a pretty awesome place to live. I love it here. So
Nice. So do you go over to Mount Baker, go skiing?
Actually, my late husband and I had ski passes up to Cypress, which is up, and it sits right above Vancouver. It is an amazing view when you go skiing there, because you go look down one way and it's one of the fjords going on up to Whistler, and then the other way you see Vancouver. So I have never skied Baker. Just
wow.
It was cheaper for us to go up to Canada than it was to buy passes up at Baker. So that's what we did for years. So and this year I just didn't want to go by myself, was a lot of it. So hopefully next year I'll try to get some skiing in again. So we'll see.
Nice. Yeah, I grew up over in the Tri-Cities, and that was kind of one of the big things. That was our luxury trip. Like, ooh, you're going to Baker. Like, that's
Yeah.
amazing. So
Yeah.
Utah, people are like, whatever. We got like the best skiing in our backyard. Doesn't matter. So
Right. Yeah, I grew up skiing at Bluewood. I learned to ski at Bluewood.
oh, yep, I know Bluewood well.
Yeah, and Spout Springs, which is the dumpiest ski resort, if it's a resort ever. So
I don't know.
Yeah.
I might have been to Spout Springs once, maybe, but yeah.
It's not worth it.
Yeah, Mini of Tree probably still has some of my DNA attached to it there at Bluewood after crashing into it a little too hard.
Yeah.
I know that ski resort well.
Yep. So do I. Yeah, it was a pretty awesome place to grow up and go skiing. So for being little, it was great.
Yes. So, okay, your husband and you, how old were you when you guys got married?
We were both 21.
21. Okay, so he was literally fresh off his mission, not even a year.
Yeah, when we met, he had been back. Sorry, I've got a fly in here. He had been back he came home just after the 4th of July. So he'd been home for a month because he come back to BYU a week before school. And so he was just getting settled in his apartment. And so he turned 21 or 22 right after we got married, because we were married in June and his birthday was in July. So, and then I turned 22 in the fall. So we were practically 22. So not officially, but pretty darn close. So
don't shave off any of those months, right? We weren't a young 21. We were an old 21.
Exactly.
Right. I know how that goes.
Yeah.
That's like the guys that are 5'8". They're like, I'm 5'8 3/4. All right. Like, let's just get this straight right now.
I can't relate to that because I'm pretty darn short. So I can't relate to that.
Well, okay. So now tell us a little bit. You're obviously up in Bellingham, but tell us a little bit about kind of what's going on in your life currently.
So I am definitely trying to figure out the whole singlehood, because in my mind, I think, and you guys can tell me wrong because your situation is different, but I was married one day and I was single the next. And it's interesting that the picture that Celeste picked, because that is the last picture that I had taken when I was still married. Yeah, I had been to Portland with my son for a wedding down there, and I was with my sister out to lunch, and she had taken that picture, and I just thought it was interesting. When I pulled it up, I went, oh, it's that last picture that I was married. It was tender for me too, and so I'm currently back at actually what I call my new old job. I was able to have an opportunity to go back to my old job. So it's working here at our local fair. So I'm in charge of entries and exhibitors and superintendents. And so it's a pretty busy job starting about this week. So it's going to pick up really fast.
You're talking like the county fair, right?
It is not considered a county fair because they are a private entity. So it's not county. Yeah. So
okay.
They are a for-profit. Yeah. So it's a little different. So I do that. And then I've been teaching piano lessons for quite a few years, but was super blessed that I doubled my students this year. So it's really helped me a lot to be able to have that emotionally and then financially. That's been really nice. So that's kind of where I'm at. I've tripped around seeing my kids a lot in the last year. I've been blessed to do that and trying to figure out where do I want to land for the long term. My husband and I had that long-term goal because he was approximately 10 years away from retiring. And so some of those goals were possibly taking us back down to Oregon. And so
No, you don't want to come down here. Trust me, it's a dump.
I love the beach and I love Sun River. And that was one of our two places. And I can tolerate the politics or the beauty of the environment, both those places, but I'm not going to do it now because it's not something that I want to do for myself for the long term, unless something were to change in my circumstances. So I'm kind of just trying to figure out, what do I do from here? And that's really hard because I don't have a companion to say, okay, what do you think? It's just me. I mean, I talk to my kids about it, but that's a really hard thing to face when you're so used to, for so many years, to have somebody to talk about those things and those changes. And the plan is pretty much out the window, and I got to figure out a new one. So,
well, how long were you married and how long have you been single? Tell us a little bit about kind of the whole situation there for those who don't know kind of what we're talking about.
Sure. We had just celebrated our 32nd anniversary in June, and he passed away August 30th of last year. So I'm almost at my 1 year mark. I'm getting pretty close to it. So
Okay. Was it a sudden passing or?
it was. He had a blood clot that went into his lungs. So it was completely unexpected. You know, a lot of people have said, well, did you know? Had he been to the doctor? You know, all those kind of questions. And blood clots are one of those things that they can be detected and you can have your life saved. I just recently learned from one of my husband's cousins. Her husband has a genetic, what do you call it? I don't know if anyone they call it, but genetically he has blood clots and he has had 3 of them. So he's on Coumadin for long term, but the only sign that Craig, my husband, he had a cough, and one of his coworkers had said that's a sign, is the cough that he had. But, you know, we just thought, you know, maybe it's allergies or, you know, it wasn't a bad cough, it was minimal. So
yeah, I mean, a cough is like a super normal thing, you know, it could be a cold or the flu or COVID or, I mean, any number of things. And to suddenly think, oh, I've got a cough, that must be a blood clot. It's not like you can't see out of your left eye suddenly. And you're like, okay, that's a definite different sign. Cough is pretty ordinary. So.
Yeah, and there's always the woulda, shoulda, coulda. You know, one of my kids had said, well, I told him that he should have gone to the doctor because I had been out of town. I had been in Portland and he had thought he had pulled a muscle in his back. So there was some pain in his lower lungs, but blood clots typically start in your legs. They don't start with a pain anywhere else. From what I've read, I'm not a doctor. I don't know enough, but typically you see blood clots in your legs first, and there were no signs of that. So, yeah. So it was, yes, unexpected. I was married one night and widowed the next morning. So.
Wow. So did he go into the hospital and like, hey, it's not looking good? Or was it just like, almost like having a stroke where it's just very, very quick?
Yes. So when we always had the habit of one of us was sick, he always slept upstairs. I always got to stay in our bedroom in our bed, and he had been sleeping upstairs because he was worried if he did have a cold, he didn't want to get me sick. And so he'd been sleeping upstairs. And interestingly, the couple mornings before, I always walked in with that anticipation of, I hope he's okay. He was always fine. But that morning when I came upstairs, he said, I cannot breathe. Something's wrong. So he said, you need to get me to the ER. Well, I am 5 feet tall and my late husband is 6'2". So for me to get him down, and we live in, my home is almost 100 years old. And to get him down kind of the turn of the stairs, I knew I couldn't do it. So I called 911 and they came and they did everything they could, you know, called the emergency room, but it makes your heart stop is basically what it does. So there was not a chance to save him. Even if they would have got to the ER, I don't, you know, they have that series of tests that you do, a blood test, the MRIs. I don't know if they could have ever had the time to have done everything that they could have. So it's.
So you were there with him then. I guess I was under the impression you were down in Portland and got a call or something.
No, I had been to Portland and had been back already.
Okay.
Yeah, the wedding reception that my son had been, well, the wedding that my son had been a part of, we had come back and had actually had a party at our house just a couple days before, because Craig was an amazing cook and they had asked him to host their wedding reception here at our house. So, yeah, so he did what he loved just the week before, which is pretty awesome that he did that. So, yeah, so I was home. My oldest son had gone crabbing, and then our younger son had, at that time, was living in Bellingham. And so I had to, that was probably the hardest thing to ever do, is to call my kids and tell them their dad was not doing well. And then within that time, call my bishop and then call my kids again and tell them their dad had passed away unexpectedly.
Oh my gosh, I am so sorry.
Wow.
Thank you. Yeah, but it was a blessing that I could get a hold of all my kids and that my bishop could be here right as they were telling me, and that they could have that memory and recall that back to me, because they walked in as the EMT was telling me that Craig had not made it. So, yeah.
Okay, so this is during the COVID time. So could you not go to the hospital with him, or were you not with him when he passed?
So the timeline is about 7:15 in the morning is when I'd gone upstairs. Within a half an hour of running back down, changing, prepping myself to go to the ER with him, they had arrived and then they started working on him, and they were telling me kind of that routine that they tell you, okay, we're going to get this special chair, we're going to carry him down, you can take your time, he'll be fine. And he went unconscious. And I have worked for a doctor before, and I knew the sounds that I was hearing that they were doing CPR on him, because I got out of the way. I knew I needed to not be in the way. And I think mentally, quickly, my mind was telling me, you don't want to see this happen. So I actually came downstairs and literally was praying. And then they had come down probably within 15 minutes of working on him and told me that it didn't look good and that I needed to call an ecclesiastical leader. So I called my bishop immediately. And, you know, an interesting thing about that is I had actually been to the wedding reception of our bishop's daughter the night before. And his wife heard the phone ring because they had all this family here. She wasn't going to answer the phone. And she said she heard a voice that said, go answer the phone now. And so he talked to him, and then he called it actually another very, very close friend. And they were the two that came right away. So, and then so by 8:45, he had passed. They declared that they couldn't, that there was nothing more that they could do. So then that's when they came down and told me. So it was a pretty quick timeline. And so when I think about it, the time does seem really fast, that everything happened just so quickly. But yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Within an hour and a half, he was gone. So.
How old are your kids?
So my oldest is 31.
Okay.
And he's a boy. He lives here with me, which is a blessing, because we were kind of a year ago, we were kind of that point of, okay, it's time for you to move out. And now that he's here, he's been a lot of help for me. And then I have a daughter that's will be 28. No, she'll be 29. Sorry, I have to think the timing. And then I have another daughter that's 27. I have a son that's 23. And then I have a son that just turned 21. So.
Okay, great. So you had somebody there during kind of this whole process of going through the mourning. I mean, people are shut in, it's COVID time. I know people had a hard enough time just being stuck at home as is, but going through something like this, I mean, that's got to be extremely difficult.
Yeah, so my youngest moved back home. He was going to school in Bellingham, and he actually sadly had some conflict because of the whole Black Lives Matter thing. He had a roommate that just really came pretty down on him pretty hard, and he needed to be home emotionally for me and then for himself. So he actually moved back home. The idea was my daughter, oldest daughter, kind of wanted to make sure that somebody would be here like kind of every other week. Mm-hmm. And so my mom came back and stayed with me, and then it kind of fell apart, the plan. My sister-in-law was supposed to come. Her son needed open heart surgery. My other friend was supposed to come. She got COVID. And so it just didn't turn out. So I really did have to learn how to cope with just being by myself, which is so hard because my husband had been home for the last, since COVID had started, and he taught online. And so he was home a lot because of online classes. So I had never worried about those women that complain about their husbands when they retire. Yeah, they hate it because they're home all the time and they don't know what to do with this husband. Where I thought that's going to be awesome because I'm used to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a huge adjustment because the loneliness, the silence, it sets in like none other. Yeah.
So I'm not sure how you feel about it, but I guess as I'm listening to your story, I'm kind of thinking that it's kind of like almost a tender mercy that you were able to see him right before he passed, because a lot of people go in and find people, passed on in their bed, and I think what a blessing for that moment, for that hour and a half, whatever it was, that you were able to say goodbye in a way. So
yeah, and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, because I actually said to him, I said, well, do you want me to call the kids? He's like, I'll be fine. I just need to get the ER and they can figure out what's going on. And so I never thought that just within an hour, he would really be gone. And we had a lot of other tender mercies. We had just had an amazing vacation to South Carolina, which was always my dream, not his. And that was because COVID had taken Hawaii away from us. So we had done South Carolina instead for about 10 days. And it was an amazing vacation. And there's so many little tender mercies just in that vacation too, that I just really hold on. You hold on to those tender mercies, and I hold on to the ones that have happened for the last, almost 11 months now too. So
has there been anything, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Has there been anything that, because I've always wondered, like, if one of my kids or something was to pass away unexpectedly, was there anything that in the moment you're like, or even now that you think about, I wish I would have done or said, looking back, because I know hindsight's 2020, but I try to think about those things so that I live each day that I don't want to look back and think, ah, dang, I wish I would have done something, whatever. So I'm just curious if there was anything you've thought of.
Not really. In fact, I probably have thought the opposite. Craig was we look at the spectrum of introvert versus extrovert, and he was more introverted. And so when I would say to him, thank you, I appreciate you doing that, he always kind of just shrug it off, or it's no big deal. So I'm super grateful that I always felt gratitude for him. When I started dating him, I had been kind of duped by a missionary I was writing. He wasn't totally honest with me. And then the guy that I was dating, actually borrowing the truck from, he was desperate to get married. And it was because his stepfather-in-law was a sealer in the Arizona temple. And he just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. So I was in a real insecure place when I met him. And he was a pretty confident person, even despite his introvert tendencies. So I was grateful for that, but I just really think there's not a whole lot of regrets that I have. I think I'm pretty blessed because I realize that marriage is difficult. I mean, it still was difficult for us, and I've seen quite a few friends go through divorces, and they were divorces that were hard, and and some of them were because of affairs. And I would always say to my husband, how can they do that to each other? How can they do that? And I always said to him, if you are unhappy, please tell me before you go seeking for somebody else. And I was grateful for that. So I think I'm pretty blessed. I can totally admit that. Yeah. And it wasn't perfect. I always want to say that, but it was not perfect. We did have struggles. We did. I mean, we were just blessed enough and lucky enough to be able to figure out how to work through them.
That's awesome. Good to hear.
Yeah. Thank you.
So you guys were married for 32 years, you said?
Yep.
Okay. So he passed, that would have been 53. I'm guessing, if I'm doing the math.
He had just turned 54.
54. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So was there any sort of inclination or any sort of so to give you an idea, I have a friend his father passed away when he was on his mission, and he has told me for years, I'm going to die young. It always happens in my family. I know, like mid to late 40s to kind of mid 50s, that's going to be kind of my time. And so he's always had this feeling. And I don't know that his patriarchal blessing says anything like that or anything weird. He just has this intuition. Did he have any sort of inclination like that? Like, I don't know that I'm going to be long for this. I'm not going to be like into my late 80s or something when I finally pass.
I've never personally said that, but I have had my own, how do I want to put it? I've had my own insight from reading his patriarchal blessing, that it was his time. He had prepared well. Like I said, our home is, I think this next year, it's 100 years old. And when we bought it, it was still living in the 70s. It had 9 different colors of carpet or styles. It had, I don't know.
From the 70s update.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So here's the joke. Where I live, they say if you ain't Dutch, you ain't much. And that only a Dutch can stretch a penny as far as they can. And so, and the family that we bought it from, they were Dutch. And so I think they really jerry-rigged a lot. I mean, we found a live wire in the wall with electrical tape wrapped around it. I mean, it's no wonder we didn't have a fire. So this house is almost completely redone, except for 1 bathroom. And that includes new roof, new windows. We even had the underside of the house completely stripped of all the insulation, a new sump pump, new pipes. So the house is, for being a 100-year-old house, it's fairly new. And I just feel like there was some intuition behind him to know that. And while I'm not, I need to work for the next 5 years till I can either my life circumstances change or I can collect his Social Security, but I don't need to be making millions of dollars either. And where I have a friend that her husband passed away unexpectedly and they had one life insurance policy. Yeah, so she had $35,000 is all she had to, and thankfully her kids were out of the house and their house was paid for, but she's had to, kind of gather that up. And so I've been very blessed. And so while he may have not said it directly, I believe that our spirits know when we're going to go. And if we are willing to live the way we're supposed to, we will follow those promptings and we'll do what we need to do. So that was a hard pill for me to take, to know that he knew in a way. So yeah, we had not had any of those kind of discussions ever. So when I've had people say, what would he want? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what he would want because we'd never had that discussion. So it's hard. So once again, it goes back to those hard decisions that I need to make on my own. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So he didn't make any sort of plans around this then, like, okay, in the off chance my patriarchal blessing comes true and I'm out of here pretty early.
Yeah.
Nothing like that, huh?
But like I say, reading it now for me, I see it. I see it now.
Right.
And I mean, it was even down to when my girls basically planned his celebration of life. I was in such a fog that it was all I could do was just read it and say, well, you need to change this because this didn't happen. And they really wanted to, they wanted to bring in his feelings when each of the kids were born. And so I'm trying to think, like when the kids were born, I mean, hello, it's been 31 years with the oldest. And so that was all I could do was just to kind of get through each day. And they did a great job, but I couldn't say, this is what your dad wanted in planning a service. I mean, there's people that have everything down from the speakers to the songs to all those kinds of things. And I didn't have that. Only inspiration I got was I was able to get a hold of one of his former mission companions that flew up from California to speak. So I felt pretty strongly about that. But other than that, I was, do what you want, kids. Sounds great.
Were you guys able to have a full service or was it mostly virtual because of COVID? Or
so our only stipulation at the time was we had to have it outside. Okay. And we have one of those buildings. Well, we did. We've switched buildings now that had one of those pavilions. And I told the bishop, I said, that is ugly. I do not want to have one there. But we were lucky enough that there's a local gentleman here that had built a pavilion at one of the parks that is within 2 miles of my house. So we were able to secure that. But interestingly, and I think this was another tender mercy, our lovely governor, who was probably following yours, Everett, shut it all down on Monday, the Monday after we had the service.
Wow.
It was 25 people and it still had to be outside and everybody had to be masked. And so that was a huge tender mercy that we could have whoever we wanted, just as long as it was outdoors.
It just slipped in under the radar then, or right before it all shut down.
Right, the timing was just
totally
under the circumstances.
Yeah. Right. And we had to have it quickly because my one son-in-law had just been accepted into BYU for their master's program and he needed to be back. And then my other son-in-law had to be back also. So we pulled it off. He passed away on Sunday and we had it Saturday, the following Saturday.
Wow.
So those were all the steps through that were all tender mercies between the autopsy being done, getting his body taken care of, and then being able to have the service where we did. So yeah, we were very blessed because my mind's reeling through everything, and it was important for my son-in-laws to be there as much as all my other children. So
you bet.
Absolutely.
I know that
go ahead, Jen.
grief comes in waves, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
And there are days you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get through this. I'm doing great. And there's other days where you're just like, I'm never going to make it. Like it's killing me, Yeah. What was that like for you over the months that followed?
My funniest. Not to
get too detailed, but yeah.
No. So my ward was great. They brought food in, and I've never had food taste so disgusting in my entire life. And one of my favorite parts of When we moved.
Did you write that in your gratitude journal?
I know.
Totally,
Disgusting.
It was because your husband cooks so well, right? That's yeah.
Exactly.
To the Relief Society, thanks, not next time, right?
Yeah, like ladies, none of you can cook like my husband.
Right.
Sorry.
They were self-conscious about that because they've been to parties we've had here at my house. So the morning that it passed away, my one daughter called her close friend, who her dad happened to be the state president when we moved here. So we've had a good friendship with them, and they came immediately. And he is the kindest man, and she's the most gentle woman, and he's actually our state patriarch now. And so she said to me, she said, well, we're going to go home and pick up a few things for you. So it was later that afternoon, and I opened my cupboard, and this is just some of the things. She bought 2 cases of water, TP, and this is all the Costco size, paper towels, olive oil, and if you haven't had them, they're amazing. They taste good now. The chocolate covered almonds, macadamia cereal. I can't even remember everything. And she said, I'm sorry it was Sunday, or I would have gone to Costco for more. It was just out of my food storage. And so then the food started rolling in, and we sat down to eat lunch one afternoon. And this was after the service, because my daughters and my one son were able to stay a little bit longer. And my closest childhood friend was able to come and stay too. And we sit down, and I take a bite, and we'd had this, and it was good kind of the first time. And I said to my daughter, I said, this tastes disgusting. And those were my exact words. And she said, Mom, unless you're going to puke, eat your lunch and move on.
Good advice. Good advice.
Yeah.
On with the grieving process.
Right.
So it begins.
When funeral potatoes will create another funeral, right? They're that bad.
Yeah, we didn't get any of those, thank goodness. And honestly,
Really?
I still have a lot of the leftovers in my freezer. I just, because my mom came for that week about 10 days afterwards, after everybody left, I need to just go throw it away. I mean, it's a year old almost now, and I just need to go check.
Yeah, it's okay.
There's a mental, but the waves are the worst in the morning because I wake up and minded, I have my library on his side of the bed, my journal, my scriptures, my notebook, and so and it's been there, and it will probably stay there for a while. But the waves come then, and then just when there's triggers come.
Right.
When he loved golf, and so passing golf courses can be hard, and then the things that we've missed out on in the last year, those are the triggers, is the plans that we had. So you can't avoid them.
Oh, go ahead, Christina.
Oh no, I was just gonna ask, like, when you have the triggers and the waves, what keeps you going to, I don't know if you jump through the hurdle of it or just go through it.
Well, thankfully, like I said, my sister has been through it. She lost her husband to cancer in February or January. Yeah. Interestingly, they both died on the 30th, and they almost died at the exact same time.
Oh.
So she's been a super big help. And then I actually have a friend I recently connected with from high school that he lost his wife 4 years ago. And so he's been an amazing help because he gets it. He and his wife it was a sudden passing also. So, and that's hard because, yeah, I have some great support in my ward, but everybody says, I can't imagine. And some days I want to say, just try it. Send your spouse off for a week. Don't talk to them. Pretend they've died, and then try to deal with your kids. And even adult kids are hard to. You still have different challenges because they don't have a dad to ask. I mean, my one son doesn't have me to call to talk about BYU football. I'm like, hello.
Wait, you don't talk to him about BYU football? Not your jam, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean.
Well, if you need
Zach
surrogate
Wilson.
BYU football fans to talk to your son, I'm sure there are probably 2 or 3 guys on this broadcast that are, including me. Now, I almost wore my Y shirt tonight, but hey.
I think sometimes just in the singles world, no matter how you end up getting there, just finding someone who understands, who can relate to your story, who can hear your story and just be like, yeah, I get it. Like, I think that's such a strength it's an important piece to being in this singles world, because there's so many, it seems like everybody seems to be married in our church. Right. We did learn that that's not the case in conference, but at church, it seems like everyone's married. And so just finding someone who understands, it's so important. Like, it's such a good connection to find someone who can relate. So I'm curious though, did you ever find yourself, I hear this a lot, just people who've gone through divorces and stuff. Did you ever find yourself like kind of bitter toward Heavenly Father? Like, you know, why did this happen to me? Or why would you take him? He was a great man. He still had things he could do. Like, did you find that there was a bitterness that came along with that? Because you seem so like positive and like you embrace the Lord, but did you have those moments as well?
Oh yeah. I can remember the first time, I'm trying to remember when it was. I started counseling in about November. Thankfully, my daughter had that insight to say, you need this. And I remember telling him, we were talking about, you know, generally you talk about the week and kind of what's going on. And I was still in that once a week period. And I said, yeah, I got mad this week. And he said, so what'd you do about it? And I said, I turned over our wedding picture that sits on our dresser. And he said, so how long did that last? I said, turn it over the next day.
Okay.
But my bitterness more has been, like you said, why did you take a good man when, and I'll get tender about this, when I know there are women out there being abused by men in and out of the church. And I watched that. I watched that with my neighbor when we lived in Oregon. I watched her husband beat on her in front of my child. So that's why it's a little more tender for me, because I couldn't believe he would not only do that to his wife, but not have any shame in doing it in front of children, including mine. And you think of all the difficulties that are in the world. And I found out, here's probably another reason why it was hard. It was about 2 weeks after he had passed away. And you get lots of cards, and some of them are just that really simple, I'm sorry. But the one card that I got was from a family that they're in our ward, and he's our dentist. And his wife sent me a card, and she said, my first memory was shortly after we had come back to Washington, when he got back into the practice with his dad. And he had come home, and he shared with his wife that my husband had paid for the dental work for a homeless man.
Oh,
And it just left an impression with her. And as I read that card to my youngest son that week, he started to cry too. And he said, what else did Dad do for somebody that we don't know? And the other cards that I'd gotten were for a couple of sisters in our ward that were widows, or they had inactive husbands or had been through divorces. And they said they were so grateful that he reached out to them when he was the high priest group leader to make them feel included, because their husbands, if they were non-members, they wouldn't come to activities, but he made an effort to make sure. I mean, we had a party in our house with 50 people in November one time, and he made the effort to make sure that those women that were single, no matter how it was, whether non-member husbands or not, were there. And so he, for being an introvert, he sure had a gift to want to reach out to people. And so for me, it's like, that's so unfair. Why do you take a good man? Don't have
and leave a bunch of jokers here on earth still.
Right.
Like, where's that well-placed lightning strike when you need it?
Totally. Yeah, exactly. And we can say that it's his time. I mean, I can go through all those warm and fuzzy. It was his time, and it was meant to be, and his work was done. But I'm thinking, could you not give him another 5 to 10 years of work? I mean, give me some more time, or even that, all the way to 80, or 85, like we had hoped for. Right. So yeah, I think I manage the bitterness probably better than what a lot of people do. I'm on the LDS Widows and Widowers group, and there's some of them, generally the widows, the females, take a harder time with it than the men do. And that might be just because we're more vocal, the men aren't as vocal, but we're all seeking for understanding, especially those that are younger, closer to my age and younger. So yeah.
Did you find that when people were trying to console you and they would give you those positive, I know people like to call it toxic positivity, but like when they say, hey, it must have been his time, or, he's on the other side doing his own, a new mission, or, those kind of like positive twists to things. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with those, but in the moment, you almost need like a validation, like, dang, that's tough. I'm sorry that you lost your husband. Like, I feel like sometimes in the church, we kind of just twist things to have the positive, and which is good, but it's tough, I'm sure, in those moments. Because I remember, this is nothing it's similar, but nothing to what you went through. But I struggled with fertility, and I always would have people come up, oh, don't worry, when it's time, it'll happen, or the Lord will bless you, and I know they meant well, but in that moment, I just needed to hear, like, I needed to be validated for that. Must be hard. That must be so hard not to have answers. Why? Like, why could your spouse not continue on when we have people out in the world killing each other? Again, it's like, why is there that inconsistency? And sometimes just validating that makes you feel good versus the positive spin we always put on things in the church. So anyway.
I think in the church, and I think in society in general, we struggle with grief. We do, because we just don't know what to say, or we're worried we're going to say something stupid. And I have said to people, the only stupid thing you can say is the Lord needed him more than you did. Otherwise, I know which people in my ward, when they say, how are you? I can dump. And I actually have one good friend that her husband was the one that came with the bishop. And she does just say, go ahead and dump. Let's just talk about it. And she's there, and she doesn't get it, but she does the best that she can have to have empathy. And I think that's one of the keys, is empathy instead of sympathy. Because it's just hard. And although I had a brother in our ward, when we first came back to church, say, instead of how are you, is how are you feeling? So it became a more in-depth opportunity to just say, I'm having a bad day. I mean, Sundays were hard at first when we came back to church, because everybody's with their arm around their spouse and all happy, and they can share all those happy thoughts in Sunday school. And it's just not that way for me. It's just not that way.
And do you find that sometimes people, since they don't know what to say, they just kind of like keep their distance? They're like, I'm not really sure what to say to Kelly. So I'm just gonna like walk down the hall real quick or whatever. I think that sometimes we just need to realize it's okay to even say, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry, I don't have the right words, whatever. But I noticed when I first was divorced, like that was kind of what would happen. People would kind of, I don't think they're trying to be rude, but they just didn't know what to do. So they just kind of like kept away from me.
Yeah, and it's been hard. Our ward has shifted a lot in the last, during COVID, we've gotten about a family every month, and most of them are younger, late 30s. And so they've got a 20-year roughly gap from me. And so they have little kids, and they don't know about my late husband. And so they don't even know how to relate. A lot of my friends decided to move off to the Happy Valley of Utah. So those people can understand more because they knew him. And I think that's the connection too, is knowing him, and they don't. So, and yet we have one sister in our ward that she checks on me about once a month. How are you doing? What do you need? And I know it's sincere. I know she's trying to make that effort, even though they moved in probably about 2 years ago. So she does know who he is, but not the way a lot of other people do. So that makes a difference too. Yeah.
I think that's something that divorced people and widow people do have in common, is I don't know what to say to you.
Right.
Like, I don't know how to comfort you. I was thinking just now, I have a friend, a female friend. She's someone I've worked with in the past, and she's going through her second divorce, and she married a widower. And I don't think this is the only thing that contributed to the divorce, but one thing she said is there was always sort of an idolization of the deceased spouse. Like even at Christmas, they'd have, they'd talk about her at Christmas. They would like have a sock for her on the mantle. They would, and it was just all this stuff going on. And she was just like, and then there would be sort of, she would feel this way anyway, sort of an ignoring of her. And she said, I was worried about that going in, her feeling was, here I've been in one marriage where I was treated really poorly and told I didn't matter. And I went into another marriage where, not because he was mean to me, but because he so loved the wife that died, it was almost like there wasn't bad energy directed at her, but there was a lot of good energy not directed at her. And eventually there was bad energy, you know, he did compare her. And so eventually she just said, I am not down for this. You know, it was hard enough recovering from the first marriage. And so I think there's probably a lot of divorced people who probably look at widowed people and say, wow, she'd be great, or like, he'd be really awesome. I don't know, you know, especially because I've been dumped on before and told I'm not a great husband or a great wife. I don't know if I can live up to someone who he or she actually loved them, you know? And what do you say to people like that who have that fear?
So I have an awesome experience with that. So it was November. I had gone to my parents for Thanksgiving because it wasn't reasonable for my kids to come home for Thanksgiving and for Christmas, since they were living, you know, 3 of them were living far away. And so I had, and I can still tell you, it was 4:38 in the morning. I don't sleep well still now. Then was even far worse. And I woke up and I heard in my head, you need to join a dating website. And I went, are you kidding me? He's been gone 3 months. So I went back to sleep. And that was the other interesting thing, is I went right back to sleep. No getting up and getting a drink of water, going to get something. I went right back to sleep.
And that was God saying, don't do it.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Well, yes and no. So that morning, my parents didn't have church until, I don't know, I think my parents don't have church until like 11 or something. So I thought, fine, I'll do it. Well, my sister had told me about Match and LDS Planet and, you know, something. So I thought, fine, I'll just get on to Match. Well, okay, they tell you not how to do that. So you're kind of stupid when you join. You don't know whether you're swiping and who sees you and who doesn't. So they give you those first suggestions. It pops up and I know the first guy. He lived in Connecticut in one of the wards when I was a nanny. Oh, so of course, wow. What do? I click on it. I didn't know he was going to see that I clicked on it. Oh, yeah, dumb me. And it was about an hour later and he sends a message and he said, how come you can't say hi to an old friend? So I messaged back because he had paid for that free messaging. Yeah, oh, totally. It gets worse. So I messaged him back and I said, so you know who I am? And he comes back and says, but does it take that from you to say hi to a good friend? So I come back and I said, then, oh shoot, what'd I say? I can't remember what I said. And then he comes back and he says, you grew up in Walla Walla. Well, later he told me, he said, I thought of the most obscure thing that just not anybody would know. I mean, people know Walla Walla now, but it is a funny name. So we got talking and then I learned he was not a good communicator. And then we finally got a phone call. There was some things in between. And it was about a 3-hour phone call. I had been back home. It was probably a month later. And all of a sudden in the conversation, he said, and he was divorced. It sounds like a very bitter divorce. And he was pretty arrogant. That was my opinion of him. And he said, don't you know you have got to fall out of love with your husband before anybody will ever love you again?
Whoa.
And I was like, what? No.
We have a scientific name for that. It's called bovine excrement, which is the scientific name for BS. But you go right ahead.
But I was so volatile at the time that I believed it for a little while. And of course, I just cried. And I've had a number of promptings that I'm supposed to get married again, including my mother-in-law believes it. And so does my brother-in-law. And anyway, and so he ended up ghosting me, which is fine. I didn't need to be able to deal with that. Oh yeah, totally.
There's another tender mercy right there.
Yes, yeah. A lot of tender mercy.
Add that to your tender mercy list.
Yes.
And sadly, he actually died of a heart attack about 2 months ago.
Oh my!
Really?
Oh my God!
A
Whoa!
friend that I have stayed in contact with. She was a nanny, and she did marry one of the guys. And she'd actually said, my friend had said, oh, it'd be great if you and he got married. And I was like, no way. He could be the last person on the earth. And I would never marry him because of his attitude and his arrogance. So when I found that out, when she called me and told me he had passed away, my snarky side said, I hope my husband found him as he crossed those pearly gates and went and blocked him. Said, why did you talk to my wife that way?
Don't talk to my wife like that.
Do you think, Kelly, that your husband would want you to get remarried? Obviously, you guys weren't planning on one of you leaving when you did, but is that something you think he's like, you know what, I want you to be happy. I want you to find someone who's going to love you and care for you?
It's interesting that you use that word happy. I did go back into his journal, and just after we got married, that's one of the things he wanted for me. He specifically said that. And because I always joked with him, you only need one, or no, I'd say, just remember, I'm the first wife. If I die, I'm the first wife. And then he'd comment, nobody needs more than one wife.
In his case, maybe that's true, but yeah, but what you want, the opportunity for more while you're still here.
Right. And I think if we're able to grasp that spiritual perspective, I mean, men are that they might have joy. Mm-hmm. And that includes women. It's not just the guys. And so if there's a plan for me, which Heavenly Father has a plan for all of us, and it included him passing away, and it includes something else for me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had these different promptings. I actually have them written down, and I've wanted to burn them at times when I've been so frustrated. Mm-hmm. But then I realized there are things that I need to grow and develop, and the person I'm looking for, there's qualities in him. And quite frankly, I was looking over him recently, and a lot of them are different from my first husband. And the ones that I need to be developing are my weaknesses. I kind of had that little bit of an aha recently, saying, and some of them are cooking more like my husband did, because I'm not a bad cook. It's just not my favorite thing to do. And because
follow his cooking example.
Yeah, I actually recently made something, and a friend was like, you can cook, see? It was awesome. So I learned to use our pizza oven, which he built. I learned to use the smoker, so I can do it. Yeah, I'm capable.
Nice. Yeah. YouTube's always your friend when it comes to things like that, right?
Absolutely.
And TikTok. I mean, I've even learned to place to go on Pinterest, and I have lots of Pinterest recipes. It's just, do I use them? And as a single person, it's, what can I make on Sunday that will last all week and I can still take to work, and then maybe something different for the evening. And yeah, it stinks. Yeah, like the cooking part stinks, but
jerky, you can make jerky and it will last all week.
It's true.
But yeah, I don't know what else to make.
Well, I usually make, Friday night was pizza night at our house. So I now that I've learned to use the oven. Yeah. In the summertime, it's easy to do it out in the pizza oven. Yeah, and then it lasts all week. Or go buy a chicken from Costco and figure out salads to go with it. Yeah, so I'm learning, and it's a desire thing. I can cook. I can totally cook, but it's just the desire to do it. Yeah. So yeah.
So Kelly,
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Christina. Go ahead.
No, I think I just want to recognize, because I learned, I've gone on, I dated a widower in the past, and it was such an eye-opening experience for me that I learned so much about me, and at the same time dating a widower. One of the things that I learned is, instead of like telling them to, I didn't say for that person to move on, but in general, like the moving on versus moving forward with them is such a much more resonating and loving way to connect when you're dating with a widower, because like moving on has the feel of like you're almost like for wanting to forget the past, whereas with moving forward with them, you're still a part. It's still a package. Like you can never take that away from the person's memory and the things that they do. So it's like adding, it's like blending the family together. So that was one of my favorite things, because I feel like I'm divorced. I can also apply that in that situation, because it's also a loss. It's also, there's a grieving process. Yeah, sure, I may not want to take my ex-husband with me, but I think the lesson the lesson that I learned from that life is like, allowing me to move forward and be the person that I want to be for my next partner. It kind of like led me to that. So I just want to recognize, it's just like everything that you've shared so far is so beautiful, and it's so refreshing to hear, and all the tender mercies as well. So just wanted to say that.
And I do look at my weaknesses that I had in our marriage, and I realize that I've got to change those. I've got to be a better person for this new person, because they're going to bring experiences into their life too, no matter who they are and what they've experienced. I mean, I'm not going to marry somebody that's obviously 20 and is still building on their experiences. I also don't want to marry somebody that's too old. I mean, I on one of the dating websites, I had this guy that was 72, 75. Oh man, first of all, his profile picture was terrible, and it was one of those accidental likes. And he went on and on about his longevity, and they'd come on the Mayflower, and he could live a long time, and he still did this and that. And I just like, dude, you're too old. You're wearing a wife beater shirt. It looks like you haven't shaved in years, maybe even bathed. And I just thought, I have my window of age that I want to stick with. So.
Well, if it's any consolation, those guys hit on girls in their 20s too. So they're all over the spectrum, whatever they can like come up with.
I think I had the white beater.
Yeah. I mean, no girl can pass up a guy in a white beater. So.
Yeah, it was easy. I finally block.
Right.
That block button can be really handy sometimes.
Right.
It can, yes. I have found that one out. Yeah.
Okay, so Kelly, I've got a question for you. So I guess the optimal in your type of a situation would be to find someone who is also a widower, and y'all could just be, sealed to your old spouses, right? But what if you fall in love with someone who isn't sealed to a spouse and would like to be sealed to you? Like, how would you handle that type of a situation? I mean, that's probably, you wouldn't know it until you got there, but have you considered that whole situation?
I don't think I could do it. I mean, like I said, I was blessed with an amazing marriage that we worked on. We had to work hard on it for it to be that way, especially because we had differences. But I also think on the same hand, I almost want to praise any man that's able to take on a widow. And once again, Heavenly Father has a plan. And quite frankly, this is going to be a little bit funny. They're going to be blessed with a pretty amazing wife in the hereafter, because I think they were willing to say, I can care for this woman. In fact, I think of the men that were asked to take on widows in the pioneer days.
Exactly.
Okay. They not only had to take on that, but all the garbage that went with trying to travel across the plains in not even close to ideal circumstances. So I think because I did have one guy say to me, and I was always a believer that if I was going to be on those dating sites and I was going to like somebody, oh, hang on, I got to turn off my alarm here. If I was going to date somebody, I was going to find a conversation, and I was going to find something common. Well, this guy was from Springville, I think it was, Utah, and he was a hot air balloon pilot. Ooh. So in Walla Walla.
Or a profession?
Ooh.
Is that like
no, a hobby.
Okay, I'm gonna say, like, wow, how many hot air balloon rides is this guy given? Like,
oh, yeah,
all right.
That's how I worked my way through college.
Right. Some people do the horse and buggy, other people just do the hot air balloon, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Great date idea.
I don't know if Everett knows this, but in Walla Walla, they have a hot air balloon festival every spring. So that was the big thing for us, because it was right around the corner. So we could just get up at 5:45, be over to the park by 6, watch them go off, go chase them. And then, and it was 3 days. And so I thought, oh, I have that in common. It's something I love. In fact, I just saw him in Provo over the 4th of July. It was so cool. And so I created that common thing for a conversation. He didn't even acknowledge that. First thing he comes back is, well, my wife did not live an ideal lifestyle, and therefore our divorce caused what'd he say? It caused me to reflect that I need to not be sealed to her for the rest of eternity. And so I am only looking for somebody that I can be sealed to. I'm like, okay.
Wow.
I didn't even go there. Let's just talk.
Wow.
This is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. No offense to the guys who want to be sealed to some. I think it's a great thing to want to be sealed
Right.
to someone. But we act as if I don't do it by the finish line in this life, like I am damned forever. And that has just never been any kind of doctrine anywhere close to being taught by anybody in the church.
Right.
And I just think, rather than say anything bad about people who think that, I would just say, I love the idea of, we say they'll sort it out in the hereafter. I know that can be cliche, but that really is true. Like they really will. And like people will be paired, with someone who's great for them, like you say, and maybe they'll be rewarded with something even better, for having had the faith to love someone that they knew that they wouldn't be with forever. The other thing too, I say, is that doesn't mean the association ends at death with the spouse that you were with for part of your earthly life. We make it sound like because I'm not sealed to you, we won't know each other, and it's like, no, the love will continue. You still, it will be different than it was in this life, but I think we'll still have those friendships. And so I think we need to have a brighter view of the hereafter, basically.
Yeah, I agree. I think that sometimes we forget the eternal perspective. We're also like this lifetime, right? And there's so much more that comes after this little tiny lifetime. And if you get so caught up just with this last, so many years of your life, you're gonna really limit your abilities possibly. So yeah, eternal perspective is just key in any of this type of stuff when you're dealing with being single at our age in the church. So.
And I think that, honestly, my husband, okay, I get married again, and it doesn't matter what his circumstances were before, it could be any person. I believe that my husband will thank him, and he'll say, thank you for doing, because I feel like my husband has made a sacrifice. He has made a sacrifice to leave what is a pretty good earth life. I mean, yes, we have lots of struggles, and my kids, my grandkids will never know their grandfather, and that's a super hard thing for me. My oldest,
they won't ever know them in this life, but they will know
exactly.
him.
Thank you. My oldest grandson just turned 3, and he does remember him when I have a picture of the two of us on my phone right now, and he will point to him and say, Papa. But my granddaughters, and I have a grandson that's probably coming this week, fingers crossed, will only know him. And I like to envision that magical, he's talking to him as my grandson's getting ready to come soon. I kind of just envision that he's going to say, okay, watch out for your Nana. She's a little crazy at times, but there is some counsel that will be coming from him as his little spirit comes into a body, and hopefully, like I said, in the next couple of days. So I think any man that is willing to take a widow will be blessed with a hot wife, as my kids would say.
There you go. Hot wife in the hereafter, huh?
Yeah.
And I also learned and heard, and I think there's some truth to this, that when you date a widow or a widower, they are just one of the best people that can share and give love, because they never stop sharing that love. It was only stopped because of like how life happens, but they just have the capacity once you're with them. And maybe that's why I had a little bit of a hang up with the widower that I dated, because I had envisioned that once we get there, then I would have that maybe same or more love that he was able to share with the late wife. And won't you want that, just the back, it's just that there's just the capacity to love is, I think, is endless, right? Because it just never stops. And when they're there, they're like, you're supported, you're loved, and you're cared for. So
my therapist put it in a way, because we have discussed this a little bit, because I said I have a fear of getting married again, because I was talking with a friend, and I said, you live your life up to 18, and you're under that shadow of or umbrella of your parents, and a lot of your attitudes and your lifestyle come from your parents. And then from that point, and for me, it was almost 22, I kind of had established myself, learned what I liked as an individual. Well, from 22 on to 53, it was all a we. And I said, that's really scary to start all over. Dating's totally different at 54. But he reassured me and said, but you know how to do marriage. You know how to work through a good marriage. And I think Christina has a good point that, and once again, I am the first one to admit that I am not perfect, and I could list my weaknesses, and especially the ones that were in our marriage, but I got to make sure that I still can bring to the table what I can bring, and hopefully we'll meet in the middle somewhere. Right. So, and the ideal is to marry a widower, but I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, I think we, we got to remember that not all divorced people, many of them were great spouses, and they had a spouse that crashed and burned.
Right.
And there are even a few widows and widowers who had horrible marriages that just hadn't ended before one of them died, basically. Right. I actually remember a dating profile that I read once when I dated last time. And she literally wrote at the end of her say, "Don't worry about me staying sealed to my deceased spouse. I hated him and I'm glad he's dead."
Oh,
ouch.
And that's how it ended. And I was just like, well, dang. I guess I'll only shine compared to that guy,
Could that be a testimony or something?
And I think she's actually remarried, and I kind of follow her on Facebook, and she seems really happy.
Oh, good.
With this second marriage. And I'm just like going, oh, cool. It almost sounds like it would have been hard to be worse, than what she had before. So even widowers, I think, have had their struggles, no doubt. And I think there are divorced people who may even have had a great marriage for like a decade or two, but then it just got ugly, so it's hard to say where the journey went.
Right. And that's the similarities that we can all, share with each other, that yes, there's a loss, there's grieving, there's we can empathize and sympathize, but at the end of the day, it's like marriages takes work. For being married for 32 years, it feels long, but it's also like wonderful of ups and downs and all that. And I think that's so applicable when we're into dating or getting into a relationship. You're getting to know that person, and I like that you have this growth mindset that I'm gonna work on my weakness, because I think we're all a work in progress, and that puts the human aspect to us. We can have the eternal perspective, but sometimes that eternal perspective robs us from being in the present, staying in the present, and just living life and enjoying what life has to offer.
Well, and I think in Kelly's situation, that's clearly the kind of marriage where, though imperfect, it was a good marriage. Like it was, and it would have gone on, to the end of life, however long that would have lasted, probably. And so I definitely think an advantage of someone who's been in a marriage like that is that it's almost like they haven't tasted the bitterness, at least not for an extended period of time. And I got to admit, that would be refreshing in a dating pool where a lot of us have been really hurt bad. And it's hard to tell those who've healed from those who haven't sometimes.
I can see that you wouldn't probably carry those, the baggage. I mean, there's certain baggage, obviously, that comes from being having lost your spouse, but I think there is baggage that comes from the bitterness and the rejection and just the issues that come with maybe an unfaithful marriage and divorce that follows. So another tender mercy. I mean, I guess if you want to look at it that way.
The list gets bigger and bigger.
I have a good old list of tender mercies by the time.
I do. Yeah, I do. I've been pretty blessed. Yeah. And I mean, I think back of the difficulties that we did experience in our marriage, and thankfully we were able to, I mean, like I said in my profile, we went through almost losing our home, bankruptcy, and the bankruptcy came back to haunt us later once we moved up here. And it was while my husband was getting his PhD, and it is actually haunting me now just a little bit because of the lovely IRS. It's not going to be a big deal. It'll settle just fine. But I think of the difficulties that we did experience. And, there was definitely one of them that I lost some trust and faith in my husband because of some choices he made. Now, that wasn't infidelity or anything like that, but he wasn't just totally upfront. And later, I realized he was just trying to protect me. He was trying to protect me from the hurt that it could have caused. And so I feel like going forward, I can just say, lay it out. This is what it was like. This is what I am. How are we going to work together to move forward? Because clearly, if I marry somebody that's 54 or 55 or 56, they're going to have some of those same things that they're bringing to the table that we will always have to work through. So, and I don't always have that happy attitude, like somebody said, some days I just don't want to do this. And I tell Heavenly Father, this is dumb. This is so dumb. Why did you do this?
Yeah. I can tell that you're seething with anger, yes. Kelly, and that you can just barely control it.
Thankfully, my husband.
And I'm also very sarcastic.
I know, but that's what it was. I've talked about healthy sarcasm. It's just being able to laugh at things. And thankfully, my husband was that way. He just kind of had a funny attitude, never would have ever hurt anybody. And I think some of that trickles back down to me that I just kind of have to say, okay, well, and I love when people say, we knew we would come to earth, that we knew it would be hard. Okay, hello, I don't know that I said, please pick me because my husband's going to die at 54. Please let me come to that one. Yeah. Just don't know if I always believe that.
I totally agree with you. I just think that maybe the Lord was like, there are going to be a lot of struggles. There are going to be a lot of hardships. There are going to just be so many I can't even list, right?
Right.
And in that moment, he's just like, I think Kelly can handle this situation. But I don't know, like, do we say, yeah, please send me? I would love to have that happen.
Even if I said that, I was stupid.
Yeah, that's
like I had not received the body yet. How the heck do I know how I'm going to?
I'm like,
you're going to be divorced twice, John. You're. Oh, great. Like, that'll be kind of interesting. That'll make life. Yeah, I was probably like this young, innocent spirit that was just like going, I can totally deal with that. I can totally handle it. Right. And now I'm here and I'm like going, what was I thinking? Like, if I knew that, that was that was poor negotiation skills.
It's like when it rains, it pours. I'm like, okay, infidelity, I'm going to catch all of you. So,
right.
I just think, we're intelligent individuals and I can't see us all being like, oh yeah, I totally want to do that. Yeah.
Right.
Send it to me.
Not
like,
understanding.
No.
Okay. I think we just saw the beauty of Earth, that we could experience roller coasters and going on vacation and Hawaii and Tahiti. And we're like, yeah, sure. And we kind of forgot about all the stuff that was going to be in the back of it. And because I've looked at that and have thought, and I will totally admit there's times, and they call it passive suicide, that you say, can I just get cancer? Can I just get in a car accident? Yeah. Because you just want to be with them. And I have gone there. I'm the first one to admit that I have. But then I think, wow, but I have 5 kids and 2 bonus son-in-laws and 3, almost 4 grandchildren. And, Earth life is pretty great. I mean, I have a body that's healthy, and I actually had gone to my primary physician in October. She'd gotten me just the sleeping pills and just needed that appointment. And when my blood test came back, she's like, you are super healthy. You're doing really well. I'm on one medication. She goes, let's just kind of tweak it just a little bit. And I started to cry. And she said to me, she said, I know. And she didn't know, but she has seen grief before, I'm sure. And she said, I know you just want to be with your husband. And I said, yeah, I don't want to be healthy. And yet I need to be grateful because I worked in a doctor's office and I saw people that were not healthy, that were my age. And it was mostly because of their choices, usually alcohol and drugs and smoking. And I have to say, I am blessed with a healthy body. And so it's that gratitude again, and don't always have it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I can still be a stinker, and I'm sure my husband's like, just stop. Just come on. You're lucky.
But I think there's also like the beauty of like maybe the fine print that we all signed up for, like, oh, by the way, you're gonna be human, and so you'll be experiencing all of these things, and it will help you remember that it's okay to be bitter, to be angry, to be sad, and it's okay to sit with it, and it's part of the experience. And I think that was one of the things that, you know, when we were talking about the toxic positivity, when we want to spin it right away instead of like let the emotions sink in, because all throughout my divorce I was trying to be as positive as much as I could, and then I left out a part of I was grieving because it was a loss, and that kind of backfired. I'm like, oh yeah, go to therapy or counseling because of that. So there's wisdom in that for sure.
Yeah, and the counseling's helped a lot, although I had an aha moment probably 2 or 3 months ago. And I'm super blessed. I have a friend that's a counselor, but she's marriage and family, and she found me my counselor. He's actually in Portland. I only do it on Zoom with him because my bishop had wanted me to use somebody here local. And unfortunately, the community I live in is not favorable to our church. So picking somebody within my community, because there's only one therapist here in our stake, and we did not mesh.
Oh.
Yeah. And so when I, about probably 3 months ago, I said to him, I said, please don't be offended by this. I said, you have the book knowledge, you have the experience, you've worked with lots of people. I said, but you will never be in my place. You will never be in my shoes. And I said, and I hope you won't be. I hope you don't lose your wife, because then you would have to experience what I've experienced. So that was really hard. And of course, you know, he did the, I know, and, you know, the quiet pause that he does. And so it is good. But yeah, that's really hard to not have somebody totally be able to be in your shoes. Nobody will ever totally be in my shoes except for the Savior. I mean, we all know that. And that's where you find that peace.
Yep.
Actually, it that way.
I think good therapists are just good at using whatever pain they've been through and translate it to the pain of the other person to an extent, and then acknowledge where they just can't go. I was a therapist for drug addicts for many years, and the feedback I always got was, we love you, we love working with you and everything. And some knew and some didn't, but I have never had a substance in my body. And so it was like, so they're like going, where, you know, like, how do you relate to us and stuff? I did grow up in a rough neighborhood with a lot of homeless people and drug addicts and prostitutes and some stuff like that. And so I just got used to, you know, being okay with people. But I think that was part of the reason I never used, was I saw the end result, you know, and so I was like, I do not want to do that. Right. Like, that does not look fun. And so I do think we can draw on our life's experiences to kind of identify with people. And there are just people who seem to be gifted at that. I think that's a skill I had to more learn. But I've met people, and I know they have no idea what I've been through, like with divorce. And yet I just feel like they get it, you know, and I don't even know how they get it, and I don't care. It's just nice having somebody who just can understand the pain of it, even if they don't get the specific way that my pain came to me.
Yeah.
So Kelly,
they usually have had pain though.
Sure.
And that's the key.
The gift of empathy. That's what I call it.
So you've been on these, it sounds like you're part of a LDS widower and widows group, right? And I would imagine in that group, there's still a lot of pain, a lot of people asking the question, why, you know, why did the Lord take them? Things like that. Have you ever seen the video that President Nelson kind of released here? I think it might've been about 2 years ago or something, where he talks about his grandfather. And I believe his great grandfather had, or maybe it was his father's, either his father or his grandfather, and their father had passed away when they were young. And one night he was sitting at home, and his grandfather came his father came and visited him. Do you remember that story?
I actually just read it or watched it 2 weeks ago, tops. I mean, I just got back from Utah last Monday, so I think it might have been just between those two, because I watched it and went, why can't that happen to me? Why can't I have my husband come talk to me? You know? Yeah. So I did just recently. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you'll indulge me for a second, I have a little story I want to kind of read here. This is from the Discourses of Wilford Woodruff. I've shared this on here before. Have you heard about his story that he relates with the President Roscoe, I think? Bishop Roscoe, excuse me, and a President Mahan. Have you heard this story? Where
I think you might have been watching when you shared it before, but not everything registers in my brain super well all the time right now.
He shares it every other week. So
yeah. I've only got a limited bag of tricks to pull from, so I got to use it. But it just keeps coming to my mind, like as we're talking here, and I think it's very applicable when you're thinking about your husband, especially as you're talking about what a good man he is. And oftentimes we think, why did you take him? There's so much more for him to do here. And the Lord sometimes says, well, I took him because he is such a good man, and I have so much more for him to do. And especially, it's my personal belief that living in these last days, there is so much going on in preparation for the second coming that on both sides of the veil, we're in like crunch time. You know, it is like high gear right now. So let me just kind of read this real quick. It's only about a paragraph, but I think it sort of illustrates the story. And this is President Woodruff speaking, relating this story. He says, perhaps I may be permitted to relate a circumstance with which I am acquainted in relation to Bishop Roscoe of Smithfield, Cache Valley. On one occasion, he was suddenly taken very sick, near to death's door. While he lay in this condition, President Peter Mahan, who was dead, came to him and said, Brother Roscoe, we held a council on the other side of the veil. I have had a great deal to do, and I have the privilege of coming here to appoint one man to come and help. I have had 3 names given to me in council, and you are one of them. I want to inquire into your circumstances. The bishop told him that he had what he had to do, and they conversed together as one man would converse with another. President Mahan then said to him, I think I will not call you. I think you are wanted here more than perhaps on the other side. Bishop Roscoe got well from that very hour. Very soon after, though, the second man was taken sick, but not being able to exercise sufficient faith, Brother Roscoe did not go to him. By and by, this man recovered, and on meeting Brother Roscoe, he said, Brother Mahan came to me the other night and told me he was sent to call one man from the ward, and he named 2 men as he had done to Brother Roscoe. A few days afterwards, the third man was taken sick and died. So to me, I find that just fascinating because I look at that and say, there is so much going on the other side. And while now we think, I want you here, I want you with me, there's so much for us to do, we don't have any idea how important those callings to the other side can be sometimes, especially for good men. I've had several people recently that I have known that have passed away. They're just phenomenal people, and they die quick and maybe even young. I had a guy who was in the stake presidency, high councilman, bishop, just salt of the earth, out hiking with his son last year and just died of a heart attack. And I thought, man, that's so weird. But this story always comes to mind, like the Lord has a plan and he has things going on. And as Elder Maxwell said, and I'm going to paraphrase, but he said, sometimes when the Lord calls people to the other side, there's going to be a sacrifice for us on this side of the veil. And we can't understand how important that sacrifice is, but it will be made up to us 100-fold, if not more, when that is all said and done. And we finally get to the other side and see. And I just feel strongly that your husband, from everything you've been saying, your positive attitude, the Lord leading you down these paths, there is a plan in place and something amazing that has been set in motion. And whether you find somebody in this life sooner or later, and they kind of just are there for comfort for this life, there will come a time in the next life when you are reunited with your husband and it will all make sense and it will all be worth it. So I am fascinated by your story and I am super impressed by your attitude. I just want to say thank you for being so amazing in this, because this is a huge, huge struggle and a very difficult process. And I don't think a lot of people who have not gone through that can truly relate. But I have known several people who are widows and widowers, and for them, I think it's almost a little bit extra difficult to go back into the single scene because they're like, I sort of still feel married. You know, I'm single, but I feel kind of not single. And how do you really relate to that? You know?
And yet I've had this attitude because some of it in my own patriarchal blessing, and I don't read anything into it that I've seen anything that said I would get married again. I tried to do that. But when my mother-in-law said to me, you need to get married again, it really struck a chord with me because guess who knew before I knew that I was supposed to marry my husband? My mother-in-law.
Wow.
And I have, thankfully I have a friend, she might be on here. I don't know if she was able to get on. I was literally talking to her an hour before and then we got cut off. She lives down in the Seattle area. She has got me involved in kind of the single adult group that's kind of around the Seattle area, which means I have to make a sacrifice to drive down there. And I went to one, it's an all-day drive. Graham is way farther away than I realized that it was. And I just decided that I just need to put myself out there. And it's interesting you say God has a plan. I saw it, I don't even remember where. And that quote was, God knew it would come to this. It's okay. He has a plan. Yeah. And I think of a house plan, and I think that, you know, we can pick that beautiful house, but Heavenly Father is really the ultimate architect for us. And we have to have a lot of faith and a lot of trust. And, you know, I have grumpy days. I mean, I really do. And I just have to acknowledge that a lot of, I think, and I've told this to a lot of people that tell me, and it can be hard when somebody tells you, you are so strong. You know, it feels like that warm and fuzzy compliment, but my strong comes from the people that pray for me. I mean, because I have lots of friends that still say, and my husband's family will say, we're praying for you. And it is those prayers that give me that strength and that courage to move on, because I could lay in bed all day if I wanted to. I mean, I have one day till 9:30. Oh, that's, you know, my therapist said, you know, I have people that lay in bed for days. Yeah. It's not that way. It's just not in my personality. It never has been. And so I just have to, and, you know, and I've been blessed that as I read my scriptures, there's things that become applicable just for that day. And some days it's reading just one verse. That's all I could do right after he had passed away, and he was still needing to read them. And I have dyslexia, so that makes scriptures that much harder for me. But, you know, it's putting one foot in front of another. And I'm sure that happens with people that have never been married and that are divorced. You just make that choice that you're just going to, because I don't want to be miserable either the rest of my life. Yeah, because there are people on that widows group that
are just, well, that's what I was just gonna say, like, do you feel like when you're finding happiness or finding joy, or you're going out and doing these singles activities, you kind of feel guilty? Because I have to wonder if on that widow and widowers group, like, they think I can't be happy or else that discredits the love I had for my spouse.
Yeah.
So you're able to move on that way and still feel okay about it?
So I'm kind of in a stage right now because I just went to Utah for a memorial for my husband. His family is all buried up in Richmond, and he was cremated. That was a choice that actually came very quickly to me. It was very quickly because, once again, it wasn't something we talked about. And it was hard for my mother-in-law and my father-in-law to do that, because I think they had really hoped that he would be buried up by his grandparents, and an aunt that passed away when she was only 5, and then my in-laws were buried there. But I knew it was the right choice. And so I've had a lot of those things come up lately. We just had our anniversary. It was his birthday, and then the next day we did the memorial. And I've gone through this, well, I wouldn't be doing this if he was still alive. That's kind of the point that I'm at right now. But then I also think I can't feel guilty because he wants me to be happy. And whether I get married next year or 10 years from now, why not be happy learning about being a single? And it was the first activity I went to. It was a little bit of not a shocker. I don't know what it was, but I had 2 people there say, so how long have you been divorced? And the only people that knew that I was widowed was my friend that invited me, the host, and I think one other person. And so I had to say, I'm a widow. And the guy that asked me kind of was like, I'm sorry. Okay, so where are you from? And he kind of just moved on. Where the gal that I talked to, we've become very good friends. She lives down in Portland, and actually, my sister is actually getting married, and so I'm gonna actually stay with this friend, my new friend. And I was like, I need to make these new friends because I'm gonna still have my married friends, but I'm not gonna go out to dinner and go on group dates with them. So I put myself in this new single scene so that I can still find joy in the things that I'm doing, and especially in the gospel and learning things from people, because we're put here to learn things from one another. We really are. And that's how God helps us reach out to each other and fulfill some of the things we pray for.
Very true.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say I feel guilty. I just go, I wouldn't be doing this if he was here. Maybe that is guilt. I don't know.
Well, you probably definitely wouldn't be. I mean, you wouldn't be in a singles activity. Like, hey, I'm going to go watch TV. Cool. I'm going to go to a singles activity.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah. I totally think that your husband's probably up there just so happy that you're finding people that you can relate to, finding people that you can connect with and find support from. And I think like I said, he wants you to be happy. I think he wouldn't want you sitting around mourning, this long out. I mean, I'm sure you have moments, but just in general, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the same way that it's just the same way that Heavenly Father wants us to be happy. So why wouldn't he want me to be happy? I just can't see that, because he worked so hard. He probably gave more sometimes towards my happiness than I did towards his, other than I'd be like, you need to go play golf today because I know that's what makes you happy. I really feel like he sometimes contributed more to my happiness than I did to his.
Well, I just like the fact that what you said earlier, that you are choosing to, you use your power of choice to go out and be happy. Because sometimes, when I joined like the divorce groups and whatnot, I've seen like comments that they feel so stuck, as if like, I want to wait for that right moment where we can actually make that moment. So you're making that moment for you, and choosing to be happy. And Celeste is right. There are times that it's just blah, that you just don't. But there are other moments as well that I can choose to get out of bed, take a shower, get ready for the day, and feel pretty. Because I've gone through that process, when I was going through my divorce, where taking a shower was a win. I was like, I'm gonna take a shower, I'm gonna get ready for the day, and I'm gonna put makeup on because I want to validate myself, not other people, but I want to tell myself that I can do this. So as hard as the day could go as it starts, I'm like, I'm gonna choose to take a shower even though I'm crying and putting my makeup on. And it helps.
Yeah. Mine was making my bed. I just okay, I will make my bed today. For some reason, for me, like that's a big thing. If I like back then, like if I could get my bed made, all right. I probably wasn't wearing makeup. Maybe my hair wasn't done, but my bed was made. So I'm like, all right, it's a win.
Yeah.
That guy you were mentioned earlier said that you had to let go of the love. I think that's the opposite. I think, I actually think hanging on to the love, not hanging on to the relationship, because that's different, obviously, but hanging on to the love, because in my past relationships, it's not like it was like a living hell every day of my existence. I mean, there were many good days. There may even have been as many or more good days as bad days. It's just that the bad days, ended up killing the relationship. But I think whether we're divorced or widowed, it's letting go of the bitterness part, whether it's due to the loss due to death, or a loss due to someone changed personalities, or they committed sin, or we did, or whatever. But I think when you let go of that bitterness, what I've found is you're able to function again. Like you get up. I know with myself, you start going for your dreams again, that kind of thing. And I think once that happens, there's enough love. I mean, there's enough capacity in a heart to love the memories of when it worked in my previous relationships, but also be open up my heart to the possibility of even more down the road, you know? And how do you feel about that? Do you feel like there's going to be some milestones that you have yet to reach when it comes to your own healing that will kind of be signals to you that you're ready?
I think so. I mean, one thing when you talk about the love, I mean, that I've come to my own aha about is I have 5 children. When I had my first baby, of course I was in love with him. I mean, my husband and I had created this little miracle that Heavenly Father brings all the, with us together, we put all these cool little elements and we come out with what looks like perfection most of the time. Yes, there are babies that are born with challenges. But then when my daughter came along, I didn't say, sorry, dude, you know what? I'm going to love her more than I love you. No. And so that capacity just continues to grow. Yeah. And I think that's a gift that Heavenly Father gives us. I like that. And so I'm not saying I'm being godlike yet, but I'm working towards that as I have the capability of loving another person. And then I have actually learned to love my friends to the point that I'm not afraid of saying I love you anymore. And I know the ones that know that it's not romantic love, but it is a love that we have the capability to have for everybody. I mean, there's some people, I would have a hard time with. But, and then now as I look towards milestones, as I let go of, like, we had planned this summer to do a trip down to Moab, and then we were going to go up through Yellowstone quickly. We'd been to Yellowstone a ton, and then we were going to go up to Glacier, and then had Canada not been closed, we were going to go up to Banff because we'd been skiing there in the wintertime, Jasper, and then come back down and then come back into here into Whatcom County. And I realized that dream could still be there. It could still be, like you say, a milestone that I can do. But right now, next summer, I want to go to New England. I did not have the opportunity to see all of it. Will I go by myself, or will I, my closest friend, she actually was a nanny with me, so maybe I'll drag her there with me. I recently found, I bought one of those beach cover kind of things that pop up. I had lost it, so I bought a new one when we went to South Carolina. I found it when I was getting ready to go for this weekend when I got my paddle boards out, and I thought, I want to go to Hawaii. So I posted a picture of it and said, okay, which girlfriends want to go to Hawaii in 2 years?
Oh, nice.
I've got like 10 friends.
Yeah. I highly recommend it.
I'll hop on.
Yeah, Celeste is your new girlfriend.
Paddle boarding too.
I am serious.
If there's a beach, I am so there, obviously.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah, we lost that when COVID happened the first time, and then we still couldn't get into Hawaii without doing all the restrictions. One thing about my husband is he was an Excel spreadsheet man. When our boys were younger, I was working at the fair, and then the boys were showing sheep and pigs and rabbits and chickens. So he had this spreadsheet that he would put of when I was at work, what was dinner? He'd bring dinner to the fairgrounds, and when the boys were showing, so I could run from my job across the fairgrounds. We had done the same thing for Hawaii. We were going to Oahu in the Big Island, and I'm like, I have my itinerary. I just got to find some place to stay with all my girlfriends. So I still want to do that, and that's what it is. It's finding the new, not just single me, but how I still have my own dreams. And so that's kind of on my radar. That's what I want to do, because
I'm kind of
just at home.
I'm a little bummed that I'm a dude, you know. I'd like to be one of your girlfriends too. And like, yeah, we could get like 8 or 10 of us, and like, you know,
just go get a wig and put on some makeup or something.
Yeah. Fine.
I'll come along for the ride, you know.
It's like hashtag girls only. So it's me and Christina now.
Well, the new thing is you can just identify. So just identify for a day, you're good.
Yeah, that's true. That's the new rule.
Oh my God.
So
well,
I can identify for like 10 days for a trip, you know.
If it's Hawaii, we're good. Yeah.
Yeah, I will totally identify.
Nobody's gonna judge. So.
Yeah, I'll be lying like a dog, but I'll be in Hawaii, so I won't care.
We'll get the boys' house and the girls' house and bring, a bunch of
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really just realized that, there's some things I am giving up. That the Airstream that we had bought, I'm trying to sell it right now because I couldn't afford to do the custom remodel. But that's okay. I make other and new memories that are just different. And I think that's for me, I see that as some of my healing, that's okay. And I'll find something for the next summer to do that might be totally different. I mean, that's the farthest out we'd really made vacation plans, because we always had someplace fun that we would go every year. So,
you know, and I'm also talking about, I mean, I'm talking about too, like your heart, you know, milestones, you know, like, are these, like, you know, for example, when Christine was talking about just take a shower, Celeste said, just make a bed. Are there these things where you're kind of like, I need to get to a place where I can be okay with that, you know, where I've healed enough to where, like, even just waking up with him not in the bed kind of, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm not there yet. I can totally admit that. I wouldn't expect you to be. And I don't know when you get to that point on that one, other than maybe getting married again. Because like I told my therapist, he's like, when are the hardest times? And I said, morning and waking up in the middle of the night, because I'm used to, and he snored.
Yeah, you knew he was there.
Would you roll over because you're snoring and I can't sleep? I was guilty of that when I slept on my back too, so I worked hard not to do that. But yeah, it's getting used to that, and I wouldn't call it going back to the normalcy, because it will never be normal like it was before. I mean, that's just, my son gave a super good analogy. He said, if you think about it, when you're driving in a car, your rear view mirror is only this big. It's small, and it's there for us to look back, but we don't sit and stare at the rear view mirror. Instead, we have this big windshield in the front, and we're looking forward, we're moving forward. It's like an arrow. An arrow is another amazing example. You pull back, you get that resistance, and then you shoot forward. There's no way to shoot an arrow backwards.
Or you run into telephone poles.
Or something. But we have a lot of those life examples that we could say.
Yeah.
So go ahead, whoever was next. I'm going to save that. But
I have a question for you, Kelly. So, you know, you and your husband had this amazing marriage. You guys got along great and everything. And as you've said before, marriage is often work. It's very difficult. It can take a lot of give and take, right? So are you, I mean, have you fully processed getting into another relationship is going to be a whole new set of challenges? And it may be difficult to say, gosh, I'm in this marriage with this person. I'm struggling with them now. I didn't have these struggles with my last marriage. Kind of that comparison. Does that make sense what I'm saying here? Like, that's going to be a difficult hurdle to overcome. And, you know, you talked about your friend who they had like the stocking that they hung up every Christmas or something like that for the ex. But in a way, we kind of almost mentally hang up those stockings, I think. You know, we kind of always have a way of comparing and saying, you know, maybe we got into an argument over this, and I would have never argued with my ex over that. That's going to be a difficult hurdle to overcome in a marriage. Is that something that you've thought about or you've considered?
I have, and that's why I have my cards. They're blue. That are the things that I'm looking for. And I'm going to be pretty open here. One of my biggest struggles with the fact that my husband was an introvert, and I do good in smaller circles. I'm part of a book club. I go because I've read the book, or I want to learn about the book if I haven't read the book, and I struggle there because it's a group of anywhere from 10 to sometimes we've had as many as 25 women. So I'm a little bit into the extroverted spectrum, but you know, we struggle with communication because he was just so quiet, and I'd go back to those early dating years, especially when we first met. And I still have that amazing memory of walking around BYU campus, just talking for hours. And I thought, what happened to that? And so it was something that we were always working on. And then I think of other things that I don't think I've gone much deeper than that one thing. And I mean, that's why the whole ghosting thing irritates me to no end, because I'm 54 years old. I can take rejection. And here's what's interesting, and I've shared this with a number of my friends. It's been the LDS guys that have ghosted, whether they've been ones I've met on dating websites, or I had a friend that kind of set me up online. His wife passed away really 10 days after my husband passed away. And I just got ghosted actually 2 days ago. But the non-members have been the one that say, hey, this has been nice talking with you. You know, And I know that signal of, yeah, you're done. And that's fine. I actually had what was going to be my first date was a guy from Portland, and he broke it off 3 days before the date because
He's from Portland. You didn't miss anything. You're okay.
Yeah.
Good thing.
he was short, and I liked that. But
Wait.
Wait,
I just want to get this on record here. You like short guys? Well, okay, every guy out there that's short just suddenly found hope.
That's right. They're like, yes.
that's why he liked me. He said, I like you're short. And I'm not looking for a tall person again. I'll take, okay, I was going to say I'll take anything, but I won't take anything. But he was courteous and just said, this isn't going to work. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with the LDS guys? What's wrong with that you can't communicate and realize that I'm grown up? So communication is a huge thing for me going forward. Then I look at the things that I like to do recreational, and I'm thinking, what if he doesn't like? So my husband bought me brand new golf clubs for his birthday last year. It's a pretty cute story. He always wanted to be a pro golfer, and he gave that up for us to get married.
Oh.
And the joke in my husband's family was, you buy your bride golf clubs. And I said, no, don't waste the money. We're in college. So he finally did it last year on his birthday. So I got new golf clubs. So I thought about that and thought, what if I marry somebody that doesn't like golfing? Or what if they like this and I don't like that? That'll be a new compromise that I have to learn to be able to do. And I hope that I can be willing to try those things, and that he'll be willing to try what I like to, or we just find new things to do together. Because I'm not that far away from that retirement age, and I want that to be some good golden years that you learn to communicate and adapt, and you bring in also the element of if they have children from another marriage. So you've got to learn those personalities too. It's not just learning his.
I think you said, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I was going to ask you, Kelly, that I know your kids are older, but do you think that there's a challenge that if you were to remarry, that they might be like, feeling like you've left their dad in the dust or something? Or are they, of course, they're older, so probably the younger kids would kind of feel that way more so than adult kids. But do you worry that they'll be like, are you trying to replace dad or anything like that?
Yeah, I've actually talked to all of my kids in different portions of that, and some of them are doing better with it than others. My one child is her husband's grandfather just married his brother's wife a year ago.
Oh,
wow.
I know. I'm like,
keeping it in the family.
My husband's brothers have been, especially his one brother, has been super supportive. Would I want to marry them? No.
Yeah.
Not at all. And they're all younger than me anyway. So that's a good, I have that key.
There's nothing wrong with going a little younger. It's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to be too young because like I said, I was looking at retirement in the face. And so, yeah. And I don't want to be too picky and too choosy, because then I could miss out on somebody great just because I say, well, you're 5 years younger and I don't want to do that. Or, you still have, although I have a friend that wanted to set me up with her husband's cousin. And she said, so how young is too young when it comes to kids? And I said, well, teenager would probably be okay. She said, how about a 4-year-old? I'm like, oh, I said, that's young. And then she did a quick text. Oh, she's only 6. I don't want to do homework again. I don't want to do hormones. I don't want to do driving again. That I was the
for all of those that have those of us who have younger kids, we've just had like a scare come through. Like, this is what I get to look forward to. Like, fantastic.
Right.
Thanks, Kelly. I got all that in the future.
Right.
Where I live have ditches on a lot of the roads, and so that's always scary when you have a teenage driver, because we had a drunk driver go into the ditch across from my house quite a few years ago, and yeah, it's not a happy thing to get a car out of a ditch. So
no.
So yeah, sorry, but you'll survive those teenage driving years. They're just a little bit scary the first month or so.
Yeah.
So I'm dying to ask a question. So when I dated a widower, I had to Google how to date a widower. So what are your tips for somebody, because we will cross paths walks of life. You'll
Yeah.
meet people. So what would be your tips, best kind of like how to date a widower for anybody who might be in that, in that position?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
Wow, because I'm learning that myself right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I know for me, if they're divorced, I want them to talk good about their former spouse. And I don't like calling them exes. It's a former spouse because ex has such a negative thing to it.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to talk good about it, especially around their children, because that was between the two of them, and the children are a product of that marriage. If their spouse was terrible, rotten, and did terrible, rotten things, those children will figure it out eventually on their own. The spouse does not need to say that about them. If they are a widower, I want to know about their late wife. I want to know what they loved about her, what made them happy, what were their struggles. And actually that would probably go with the same thing with even somebody that's divorced. If they're single, you're just going to have to learn what they've experienced for the last whatever years, because they're going to have had struggles too, because being single for a long time in the church, when we all talk about eternal marriage, it's got to be rough to not. I mean, we have one, two, I know of a sister and a guy that's in our ward that have never been married, and they're living life the best that they can, but it's still got to be hard. It's got to be hard. So I don't know what advice I can really give, because I've not done a whole lot of dating. I mean, I've had officially 2 friends dates, because I have a good friend that's a widower, and we've been on dates, I guess you could call them. And then I've had a date that was, I guess you'd call it a date. And another time we just kind of met up. It was supposed to be something longer and things didn't work out. So I can't give a whole lot of dating advice in my position.
But those are good because, I think that the curiosity in dating in general, that you ask good questions or meaningful questions when you go out with somebody, whether they're divorced, widow. It's like being curious about them and what's important to them. I'm finding that really helpful, in the dating scene. But of course, rejection is just redirection. When it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And I like when you said that we're all adults, we can handle this. I think, that might be a general assumption, but I think it could be a healthier mindset for us to be curious, to be, to kind of like reframe what rejection looks like for us, at this age, in this phase of life, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Amen.
Nope. I think that was just the mic drop moment, Christina.
Everyone had to
Like,
stop and
okay.
think about that.
See, I was looking at the written word.
I know. I was actually reading the chat, so
I know.
Yeah.
sometimes that chat, the timing can get a little weird. So.
You're a very interesting person, Christina. Please don't take offense.
He knows.
I know.
Yes, she knows.
Yeah.
Well, Kelly, one of the things you're probably, if you haven't experienced it much yet, you will run into this. There is a lot at this stage of the game, being single in the church, there is a lot of pain and hurt from past marriages, maybe, being widowed or widower, all of that. And so there's a lot of people who are really struggling to heal. And you're in a good spot. It seems like, at least kind of just attitude wise, if nothing else, right? Like, you're very upbeat, which is refreshing and fantastic. And it may be that Heavenly Father has somebody phenomenal for you to kind of pair up with. And then you can kind of look back and help those who may need a hand up, who haven't kept as positive an attitude, who are really struggling to find, where do I go from here? What do I do? How do I make my bed in the morning? How do I take a shower in the morning again? I just want to lay here in bed. And John, I'm sure, has seen those before in his practice.
Oh,
people
yeah.
who just...
I've seen it in the mirror.
Yeah.
When people talk about just, kind of in the fetal position in a dark corner, I'm kind of like, yeah, I think I've been there a few times myself,
I think all of us, if we're like, even if we've never been married and we're still single at this age, or if we've been widowed or divorced,
it hurts.
We've all been in those moments where we're like, fetal position sounds great
like,
right about
dear
now.
God, make something happen for me, because I don't know if I can take it anymore.
Yep.
Yep.
I think we can all relate.
Yeah, right. And mine recently was I was going into town and mine was yelling in the car. I just yelled. I yelled at Craig. I yelled at Heavenly Father. I was mad that day. And did it solve anything? Probably not. But was I able to let that out? That's probably what the productive part of it was.
Yeah.
And like I said, I feel pretty blessed that I've not gone into any kind of deep depression. I probably have a little bit of situational. The anxiety is still an issue. I actually started having a problem with it before he had passed away. And that's where it's been hard, is because he was the one that I would wake up and say, I can feel it. Of course, he would say, what level is it at? What can I do for you today? And that's been a struggle to not have somebody to tell about those anxiety days. I learned to get out, get a walk. Of course, it's summer in Washington, so now we can get some sunshine. That could be a problem in the fall when we go back to more rainy days. But
yeah. Well, I would imagine on your journey to find somebody, you're probably going to run across a bunch of paths of people who, whether they just ghost you, I mean, that's probably a tender mercy of just getting ghost versus some of the other letdowns that I've seen from other people, right? So I would just say, don't be discouraged. Keep your positive attitude. It's super refreshing, but expect bumps in the road,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What I tell people is things are going to get better, but they're going to hurt a lot between now and then. And so to just tell you they're going to get better and not fill in everything that's going to happen between now and then I think that's kind of a cruel deception.
Right.
But I really do believe they'll get better.
Go ahead.
And I think we're really blessed that the church is becoming more focused on that in all the different areas of never married, widowed, and divorced. And I'm lucky enough that we're kind of this test pilot thing that's going on, and Everett probably knows about the abundant, I always want to call it life or living, whichever it is. And
life,
that's coming up. And, when I got brought back into my job, I told who is my boss that took my job, I just said, hey, I've got XYZ going on already planned, and some of them are plane tickets. And then I'd forgotten about that coming up. And I just told her, I said, I'm not going to be here on Saturday the 7th. And it is actually right before it's like the major crunch time. And she knows it's because I want to be involved in the singles. And somebody actually over in the Tri-City said, it's my Relief Society president is making me go because they just want me to get married. And I said, no, they want you to be involved. They want you to find people that you can relate to, that you can bring something to the table, and somebody's going to bring something to the table for you. Because I think we all have something to give. When are we going to step it up and say, I have the courage to make a difference, whether it's in callings or just in everyday living? I think that's maybe where I've gotten some of my attitude with some of it too.
I think that's so important, and that we not have expectations that it all has to be about getting married. I think marriage will come when we're not looking for marriage necessarily, but when we're focused on helping other people and improving ourselves. If I could say the two things that I think will lead to it, and it just sounds like you're doing both, and that's the thing is, and then just allow the process to happen. I think my last healing process took 2 years, and I could have lied to myself at 1.5 years and said, hey, I'm ready. I'm good. Shake it off. And it's like, no, stop it. But it was like something clicked at 2 years, and it was like, no, that you really are. And it's like, oh my gosh, I am. But that could have taken 4 years. It could have happened in 1 year. I don't know. What I think when it came for me is when I quit worrying about when it's going to come. And that's what I sense from you, Kelly, is like what you're just saying. I'll just let it come when it comes. And then I'll know.
One of my struggles is just the fact that I got what I thought was promptings too early. And so it's a wrestle. And so I remember, you know, a couple of them saying, no, it's too early. And I think that's one thing that we do struggle in the church is we do put a label on, well, their spouse has only been gone for 6 months. How could they be dating somebody? It's too early. Well, it's too early for that person, because there's plenty of people that loved my husband as in a different way, but as much as I did. And so it's hard for them to let go of that.
Right.
But if Heavenly Father once again has that plan, then we need to be able to, and I, you know, reluctantly say, okay, fine, you know. And I think he's laughing, honestly. He's like, look at, you're the one that said, you know, I could only have one wife. That's his sense of humor. And so I know he's laughing.
And probably also laughing at, look at those mere mortals getting worked up over dumb
He's
stuff.
the one that's going to get.
Right. So now, you're the one that's going to have, you know, more than one.
Yeah.
Thankfully, he's probably in a position where he's like at peace with that totally, you know, like I'm looking forward to having that perspective. So.
Yeah.
I would say too, like, don't necessarily discredit those promptings that you've had and say, well, they weren't right. Maybe they were right, but just not for the reason you were thinking.
I think that often we're prompted, and I'm not just talking about in my situation, we're prompted earlier than we think we need to, so that we're prepared when that moment comes. I remember when I was called to be Relief Society president. And I remember thinking, and the bishop was actually a good friend of ours. And I was thinking, you're crazy. What were you thinking? But I saw some line upon lines leading up to that. I thought it was more crazy when he called me to be seminary teacher, because that was the worst calling ever.
Right.
But I think
I'm so glad you said that. I've done that. And it hurts.
Yeah, I love the authenticity. I really do. It's so refreshing.
And I love the talk that just came out in conference last time. He's in the details of the details of the details.
Yeah.
I think that if we have that perspective, we can see those details. And I even went as simple as saying, as I drove up to Logan a week and a half ago on that Saturday, I thought, Heavenly Father planned a place for this road so that people, because he knew that Logan would have this population in 2021, and that the rivers have provided, you know, I spent a lot of my lifetime driving from Walla Walla down to Portland to visit my grandparents, that they were able to put those dams in so they could have a road. You know, you can spend your lifetime thinking about the details of the details of the details. And I've been able to see those as I've kind of moved along. And so I feel very blessed that I think Heavenly Father has blessed me with some of this attitude too, because there's been plenty of dark days too along the way, but I think I'm getting more and more, not hit a day that I have not cried yet. I know that will come at some point. But in the meantime, it is what it is. And I'm supposed to be doing that for right now.
Yeah.
So.
And I think you said something earlier that really registered with me too. And that is that a lot of the healing needs to happen alone. I think Celeste and I were talking about this recently, but that maybe to seal the deal of the healing, that really does require some kind of connection, you know, and that maybe there's almost like a 2-phase healing process, you know, and so we can't wait till we're 100% ready.
Yeah,
but,
I totally agree. Like, I know, sorry, cut you off.
No, that's fine. That's all I was going to say.
No, I was just going to mirror that. I just think that in any of our situations, I mean, we all have our own storylines and the hurt and the pain that come along with it. But I think you can only go so far, and you should go so far. There's a point you need to get to as an individual. But I think at that point, it's almost like you need someone else to kind of help you realize you can make it the rest of the way.
Yeah, because I think Heavenly Father, I mean, unfortunately, some people are never married in this lifetime. They lose a spouse, they never get married again. They never get married after a divorce. But ultimately, Heavenly Father wants us to have connections. Sometimes they're going to be just those friends, and sometimes we'll be blessed with another spouse. And some of us are blessed with them till we're 85 too. So I love the word connection. It has actually become one of my favorite words just in the past 11 months.
I love that word. I love the word I love the word oxytocin too.
Worcestershire.
The cuddle drug. No, you know, just something as simple as touch, you know, just like holding a hand even. Like, it's just like, you know, when you've been alone for a while, that hand goes into yours and you're just like going,
Like, this is so
yeah, man, this
yeah.
is awesome.
Yes, and that is a huge struggle being, and I'm sure it is as being divorced, but and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, you worked out of your marriage. Mine was cut off. Mine was just cut off.
That's
and
true.
So that cuddle and hand holding and and even just hugging a friend feels so good. And just the other day I was with a friend and he gave me this hug, but he didn't just give me this hug, he gave me that extra squeeze. And I was like, oh, that I forgot how much I missed.
Yeah, that's a chemical change right there. That's a chemistry experiment.
I'll let him know that. But you crave it. I mean, that's why they talk about newborns that don't thrive in orphanages in foreign countries, is because they don't have that. So oxytocin is, you know, I think it's critical to our growth.
That's why I got a dog in COVID-19.
Everybody got an animal.
When he just lays on my chest and I'm just like, you know, you are not as good as a woman, but you really are. It really is comforting to have your hairy little chest on mine. That's so sweet.
Oh my gosh.
It helps.
Right?
It helps.
Yeah.
Love you, Gimme. Where are you? Love you, buddy.
My youngest son was all over getting me a dog about a month afterwards, and I just said, I need to take care of me, not a pet.
That's true.
In my mind, it would have been good to get out walking, but I have a cat, but I mean, I had pigs and I did have sheep, so I could have cuddled with them, but you know, pigs stink, and our sheep were a breed that is almost wild, so they weren't.
Cats are definitely not dogs.
Yeah,
and sometimes in some ways that's a good thing, but
well, he is kind of a lover boy cat, but
that's sweet.
Yeah, it's on his terms. Yeah, it's on his terms still. So yeah, it's pretty awesome. So yeah, it'll happen. I just, you know, it's got to be in the Lord's time. So
for sure.
Yeah.
So Kelly, somebody comes along and maybe they're in your ward or something. I'm just kind of throwing out a hypothetical here, and they essentially go through the same process, right? They lose a spouse quickly. What do you say to them to kind of help them in that moment? Because you are now in a unique position where you can empathize, not just sympathize.
Well, I have one thing to say to those people that see them first. Mm-hmm. Please remember those people 10 to 2 weeks out. Everybody brings the food in, they send all the cards, they send the text messages, all those things come out so quickly. And then, and I'm not trying to discredit the people that in my ward, but, you know, I had a number of people say, call me when you need help. Well, you are so into that just trying to deal with your grief. And honestly, this is just my personality. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, you know, and say, I'm having a bad day, I just can't get over. So that's probably my advice to those people on the other side. And in fact, my husband's cousin, her closest friend just died, and that was the advice I gave her. I said, reach out to her husband in 10 days to 2 weeks, and then try to listen to those promptings, and don't just, oh, I was thinking of you. Try to figure out more than just, I was thinking of you. That's really been because Heavenly Father gives us promptings for a reason. You know, it's, I don't know which General Relief Society board, observe and then serve. You really need to do that. If I were to give advice to somebody, grieve in the moment and realize that day by day it does get better. But then don't be afraid when, as John said, the waves come. Mm-hmm. I think of sitting at the beach, and I mean, I who doesn't love the beach? I mean, maybe there are some people that don't love the beach. But sometimes as a big wave comes, what do? We try to run away with it because maybe we're not properly dressed for that, or like the Oregon coast, it's too cold and you don't want to get all wet. We run away from them rather than embracing the beauty of those waves. And so I think I got a book from a friend, and I'm not saying it was awful, but the first chapter was about planning the funeral. And I thought, I'm a month away from, I'm out, I'm beyond that. And I never finished it. And she was so gracious when I told her, I said, I don't think it was for me. Find your help that works for you. I have a book, it's called Grace Defined or Undefined, I don't remember. This gentleman lost to a drunk driver his mother, his wife, and his daughter. They were over in Spokane and had been coming back from some presentation, and this drunk driver hit them. And he did still have 2 or 3 children remaining. His wife was actually from here where I live, and she's just buried in the cemetery over here. And that book has made a difference for me. Now, would it help somebody else? Maybe not. I would also say find those Facebook groups that will help you. Although, be careful to pick and choose about who you listen to. Right after I had gotten the invite to the LDS Widows and Widowers, 2 bad experiences. One was a guy that complained about his wife and how much he missed her. They were in their 70s. A couple of messages later, he was complaining about that he found out that she'd been having an affair. So it was too negative. And then there was a woman that she got on there and she did this whole long rant and rave. And I don't like long posts on Facebook most of the time. I want just to be, you know, anyway. She went on and on about how we need to get over our spouses, that we need to be grateful they were in a better place. And I'm only a month out at this point. And she went on and on and on how we need to have gratitude. Well, come to find out, she was 75 and had been married, I don't know, 50 years. And she, of course, people jumped all over her and said, you can't do that, because at the time I knew that my a close friend from when we lived in Michigan, her son was on there. He was 30 years old, had only been married to his wife for 6 years, 2 children, and 4 of those years she was battling breast cancer. Wow. So how do you tell a 31-year-old it's time to move on? And so you have to be careful when you're getting onto some of those groups that involve widows and widowers, because some of them, I'm not saying they're all crazy, but they're dealing with their emotions so differently, and maybe they're not getting the help of a therapist like they probably should.
I think we see that on divorce sites too, where some of my comments are, to me, that's a good filter of how healed people are. You know, and so I have a lot of compassion for them, but at the same time, there's some that I kind of go check. If she was on your dating list, just for now, take her off, and then just watch, you know, over the months and years, you know, if you're still single a year from now and she's talking in a different way, oh, okay. You know, I mean, we don't need to write people off forever, but no. Definitely, if they're revealing how hurt they are, I mean, I'm sure I did that too on posts that I did, where it was like, that sounds a little, you know, hurt.
Yeah, and there was a guy just this week or last week I'm also on some LDS 50 plus and things like that. And I was like, dude, you are so naive. He flat out said, well, I just want to marry a widow because they all have a bunch of money.
Well, at least he's open and honest.
He's made
check him off the list.
Yeah, he has made some really weird comments about money, and I just thought,
oh boy,
no, he was kind of cute at first, but then when he started making those comments, I was like,
no. I don't know.
I think that's what's great about these Facebook groups is that you can see them making comments like that. You can see their crazy posts, whereas like on mutual and things, you don't get to see that side of people. That's why I actually liked joining the groups, because you could see sides of people,
how they interact.
You like weed people out that way.
He's definitely, I ignore his comments most of the time, just scroll past really quick. I have learned that you kind of just learn those things as you go along, and on the same hand, they've been helpful too, and it's fun to have those interactions with people too, because that's something I need to be learning to do, is how to interact with different people. Now I know I need to learn that, and that's why it's okay to be able to have those conversations, and if they're not for me or for them, it's okay. So
that's that.
Absolutely. Well, we're kind of a little bit over time here, but I just wanted to say this was fantastic talking to you. I really love just getting to know you and your positive attitude and all of this. I can't believe it's been less than a year for you. I think, and I just strongly feel like there is so much more for you to accomplish, and Heavenly Father can use people who are healthy and healed and have moved on to help those who may struggle to be healthy and healed. So
thank you.
That is awesome. Yeah. Thank you for being on tonight. I really appreciate it. So you've seen the show before. This is kind of where we wrap up. Say thank you for being on.
Yep.
Love your story. And then we kind of go off Facebook and stop the recording. We have what we call the after party show, where we just sort of open it up for anybody to just kind of come on and open, just sort of open conversation about whatever. You can talk about your lawn clippings or whatever. I don't know why you'd want to talk about your lawn clippings, but there are some people out there somewhere.
No.
So you're under no obligation to stay, of course, but we'd love to have you stay if you'd still like to. So let me go ahead and we will stop.
It's about to get ridiculous. Let's